Business class, seat 3A. The cabin hums and the sunlight hits polished armrests. A sharp voice cuts the air. You are in my seat. A calm woman looks up. Danielle Harris, a leader who built an empire without raising her voice. The man leans closer. You do not belong here. Phones lift, eyes lock, a captain arrives, procedures are quoted, a quiet request becomes a demand. Who decides who belongs in the front of the plane when the rules bend for the loudest voice? What happens to the quiet truth? How far will one woman go to protect a simple seat and the dignity behind it? What power lives inside silence held steady? And what will the world learn when the person they tried to move refuses to stand? Tonight, you will step into a cabin turned courtroom. You will see a choice that grounds more than a flight. Like the video. Share it with someone who needs the courage. Subscribe to the channel, and let us begin. The late afternoon sun poured through the massive glass panels of Boston Logan International Airport, casting long streaks of gold across the polished floor. The hum of rolling suitcases, the low murmur of announcements, and the distant hiss of an espresso machine blended into the rhythm of travel. Danielle Harris walked toward gate C-21 with the unhurried grace of someone who had long ago learned never to rush for anyone. Her navy blazer fit perfectly, the gold pin on her lapel glinting under the light. In her right hand, she carried a slim leather folio. In her left, a boarding pass for NorthStar Airlines Flight 815 bound for Los Angeles, business class, seat 3A. She moved past the final boarding call with a polite nod to the gate agent. Inside the jet bridge, the air felt warmer, infused with the faint scent of jet fuel and something metallic. A young flight attendant, name tag reading Evan Brooks, welcomed her with a practiced smile. She returned it with a soft thank you. Walking the short aisle into the calm, spacious front cabin. Business class was half full. A man in a tailored gray suit scrolled through his phone. A woman in a silk scarf adjusted her seat controls. Danielle found 3A, the aisle seat in the first row on the left, and placed her folio neatly in the overhead bin before sitting. She powered down her phone, folded her jacket over her lap, and allowed herself a breath. That was when she heard it. "Excuse me, you're in my seat." The voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet like a cracked bell. Danielle looked up slowly. A tall man stood over her, face flushed, one hand gripping the overhead bin. His crumpled boarding pass was clenched in the other. His hair was swept back, expensive watch catching the light. He had the air of someone who had never once doubted that the world bent in his direction. Grant Whitaker. She didn't know the name yet, but she knew the type. "I paid extra for this seat months ago," he said, his voice rising. 3A, right here. That's mine." Danielle's gaze didn't waver. "Sir, this is my seat." The cabin fell still. Even the soft whir of the air vents seemed to fade. A woman, 2 rows back, glanced over the top of her magazine. Another passenger quietly turned on their phone camera. Whitaker leaned in closer, his cologne sharp, his tone dripping with disbelief. "You don't belong here." There was no mistaking the weight behind those words. They weren't about a seat. They weren't even about a boarding pass. They were about the silent rules some people still carried in their bones, rules about who should sit where, who deserved what, and who didn't. Danielle said nothing. Her silence was louder than anything she could have spoken. Phones clicked on. The stillness in the cabin thickened, as if everyone could feel the air shift, heavy with something unspoken. From behind, footsteps approached. Clara Monroe, the senior flight attendant, appeared from the galley, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her professional smile was tight, her voice carrying that well-trained tone of, "Let's just make this easy." "Can I see your boarding pass?" "Please," Clara asked. She was looking at Danielle, without breaking eye contact with Whitaker. Danielle reached into her blazer pocket and handed over her pass. Clara's eyes flicked over the details. Row 3, Seat A, business class, platinum pinnacle status. She blinked, then covered it quickly with a polite nod. "Thank you, ma'am." Whitaker's irritation only deepened. "I don't care what her ticket says. I booked this seat first. That should count for something." Clara finally asked for his pass. She checked it. The same seat number stared back at her. A double booking. Not common, but it happened. Still, something in Whitaker's stance made it personal. Clara turned back to Danielle. "We do have a seat available further back in business class if you'd like to move." Danielle's reply was calm, but it carried weight. "No, I prefer to stay here." Whitaker's voice turned ugly. Unbelievable. You think just anyone gets to sit in the front row these days? Ridiculous. The words landed with precision. The implication was clear. 2 seats over, a young black woman named Leah Simmons angled her phone just slightly, the red recording light blinking. The chat on her live feed began to grow. Danielle folded her hands on her lap, the gold watch on her wrist catching a glint of light. She could feel the eyes on her, some curious, some sympathetic, some waiting to see if she would stand, step aside, disappear quietly. She stayed seated. From the cockpit, the sound of the door opening was followed by firm footsteps. Captain Russell Kane emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his pilot's cap tucked under his arm. His eyes scanned the cabin, locking on Clara, then Whitaker, then Danielle. "What seems to be the problem here?" Clara explained quickly, showing him both boarding passes. Kane's jaw tightened. Then he turned to Danielle first. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to move to another seat so we can resolve this at the gate. It'll just be easier." The words landed like a slap. There was a ripple of quiet gasps through the cabin. Danielle didn't flinch. "Captain," she said evenly, "is this your procedure or your assumption?" Kane hesitated. Whitaker smirked. Phones stayed up. The tension held. Danielle's voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the cabin. "I have my seat. I have my boarding pass. I will remain here." Leah's live stream chat spiked. Comments rolled in fast. "She's right. This is discrimination. Stand your ground." Whitaker shook his head, muttering something about people abusing the system. Danielle's hands stayed still in her lap, but in her mind, an old familiar thought surfaced. "This isn't just about me. This is about every time someone thought they could push me aside because they didn't know who I was, and she had no intention of moving." Captain Kane did not look pleased. His eyes shifted between Danielle and Whitaker as if weighing which choice would cause less trouble for him. The silence stretched, heavy and unblinking. Finally, he sighed. "Let's just keep this simple," he said, addressing Danielle again. "If you'll come with me, we can find you another seat. This way, we can get in the air on time." Danielle did not move. She studied his face, noting the tightness around his mouth, the way his gaze slid toward Whitaker as though seeking approval. It was not the first time she had seen this dynamic. A loud man demands. A quiet woman is told to adjust. Clara Monroe stepped in with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Ms. Harris, if you don't mind. It's really not a big deal. We have a lovely seat just a few rows back. You'd still be in business class." Danielle tilted her head slightly. If it's such a lovely seat, perhaps Mr. Whitaker would enjoy it. The suggestion hung in the air, sharp enough to draw a murmur from a few passengers. Whitaker's face flushed a deeper shade. "I'm not moving," he snapped. "I booked this seat first." Danielle folded her hands, feeling the cool metal of her watch against her skin. She was aware of Leah Simmons still recording a few rows back. Every word, every pause was being preserved and broadcast to an audience that was growing by the minute. Her mind flickered to board meetings from years past. Men who leaned back in their chairs, who spoke over her, who dismissed her contributions until someone else repeated them. She had learned the value of stillness in those moments, the way it could turn pressure back on the one applying it. Clara's voice was gentle, but insistent. "Ms. Harris, please, we need to get everyone settled. Cooperation would be appreciated." The word cooperation stuck with her. It was always the one used when someone wanted you to give up your place without a fight. Whitaker leaned in again. "You know, it's people like you who make everything more complicated. Just take the other seat. This is ridiculous." Danielle looked up at him. "Ridiculous," she repeated quietly, as if tasting the word. Evan Brooks appeared from the galley, his brow furrowed. "Is there a problem?" His tone was cautious, but his eyes lingered on Danielle with a flicker of concern. "Nothing we can't handle," Clara replied quickly, cutting him off. "We're just getting Ms. Harris relocated." Danielle spoke before anyone else could. "Relocated," she said, keeping her voice calm. "That's an interesting choice of word." Whitaker gave a short laugh. "I don't care what you call it. I just want my seat." Leah's phone caught every syllable. The chat was alive with commentary now. "She's being targeted. This is bias. Stand firm." Others typed in disbelief, asking how something like this could still happen. Captain Kane shifted on his feet. "Ms. Harris, please, this isn't worth making a scene." Danielle considered him for a long moment. "It may not be worth it to you, Captain, but to me, it is." For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. Even the rustle of magazines had stopped. Passengers were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Whitaker muttered something under his breath about special treatment and rules not applying. Danielle caught the words, as did at least two other passengers who turned to look at him sharply. She felt her heart beat once, slow and deliberate, like a drum signaling the start of something inevitable. She thought of the young women who worked for her company, of the ones who still hesitated to speak up in meetings. She thought of her mother, who had told her, "If you give away your place once, they'll take it every time." Clara checked her watch. "Captain, we're going to lose our slot." Kane nodded, clearly impatient. "Ms. Harris, I'm asking one last time." Danielle did not raise her voice, but her words carried to every corner of the cabin. "And I'm telling you, Captain, this is my seat. I will not be moving." Whitaker's mouth opened, but before he could speak, a woman across the aisle cleared her throat. "She's right. She's been here since boarding started. I watched her sit down." Another passenger chimed in. "Yeah, and why are you asking her to move instead of him?" Clara's smile faltered. Kane's jaw tightened. The balance of the cabin was shifting, the quiet support beginning to take shape. Evan Brooks looked between the passengers and Danielle, then back to Kane. "Sir, maybe we should double-check the booking system. If it's a duplicate assignment, it needs to go through ground operations." Kane hesitated. Whitaker glared at Evan, clearly unhappy with the suggestion. Leah adjusted her phone, the angle now catching Danielle, Whitaker, and both crew members. Her viewers' count ticked past 500. Comments urged her to keep filming. Clara excused herself to the galley, returning moments later with a tablet. She tapped the screen quickly, her brow furrowing. "It's a double booking," she admitted, reluctantly. "Looks like both reservations were assigned 3A. Danielle nodded once. "Then I suggest we resolve it based on ticket status, not volume of complaint." Whitaker scoffed. "Status, please. I don't play those silly airline games." Clara's eyes shifted as she read further down the screen. Her lips pressed together. "Ms. Harris is Platinum Pinnacle. Mr. Whitaker, you're listed as standard business, for a heartbeat." No one spoke. Whitaker's smirk faltered, but his stubbornness remained. "I booked first. That should matter." Danielle's voice was calm. "What should matter is fairness. What should matter is the truth. But it seems those are negotiable here." Kane's eyes flicked toward the cockpit. "We'll need to call someone from ground operations to finalize this." Whitaker threw his hands up. "This is absurd. Just get her out of my seat." Danielle sat straighter, her gaze fixed on him. "This isn't your seat. It never was." There was something in her tone that made him look away. Kane signaled for Clara to make the call. She stepped away again, her radio crackling softly as she spoke. Evan remained near, his presence subtle but solid, as though offering silent backup. Leah's phone buzzed with messages from viewers telling her this was about to go viral. She kept recording. Danielle breathed evenly, her mind calm despite the rising tension. She could feel the moment building toward something more. Not just a resolution of a seating error, but a line drawn in the sand, and she had no intention of stepping back. Clara returned with the tablet held like a shield. Her smile was taut. Her voice sounded rehearsed. "Ms. Harris, let us move you to 6C. It is a window with extra leg room. We will bring you a welcome drink right away." Danielle looked at the tablet. She did not reach for it. She did not reach for anything. She kept her hands folded in her lap, as if anchoring herself to the seat that bore her name. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will remain in 3A. Grant Whitaker snorted. He spoke to Clara as if Danielle were invisible. "This is ridiculous. You are the crew. You decide. Move her so we can take off." Clara glanced at Captain Kane. The captain stood in the aisle, tall and impatient, like a man watching the last minutes of daylight slide away before a storm. He wanted the easy answer. She could feel it. Everyone could. "Ms. Harris." Clara tried again. "We are on a tight schedule. If you cooperate, we can push back on time and I will make sure you're comfortable." Danielle lifted her eyes. "Cooperate," she repeated. "That is an interesting word. A word people often choose when they do not want to confront what is happening." Clara inhaled. The tablet brightened in her hands. "I understand how this may feel, but there is a process. We can work this out on the ground if you will just take the other seat for now." Danielle tilted her head. "You want me to surrender a right that I paid for and confirmed, so that a man who raised his voice first can keep what he thinks he deserves. Tell me which part of that is process." A few passengers murmured. One man cleared his throat and looked down at his shoes. Another woman tucked a stray hair behind her ear and kept watching, eyes bright with concern. Whitaker leaned on the headrest of 3B, crowding Danielle's space. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," he said. Leah Simmons caught the sentence on her phone. Her live chat spiked. Comments flew up the screen. People typed out the words as if engraven them. "The easy way," Danielle said quietly, "is to respect the boarding pass in my hand. The hard way is to pretend that raising your voice is a form of truth." Whitaker flushed. He looked like a man who had spent a lifetime pushing people and never once felt the push come back. Captain Kane stepped closer. "Mom, last request. Move to 6C so we can sort this at the gate. If you refuse, I will have to ask you to step off the aircraft. We cannot start a cross-country flight with an unresolved conflict in row 3. Danielle felt a stillness rise inside her. It was not the quiet of surrender. It was the quiet of resolve. The same quiet she had felt before approving a merger that would save 1,000 jobs. The same quiet she had felt when she testified before a committee and realized that honesty did not always make applause. "Captain," she said, "allow me to be clear. This is my seat. My boarding pass is valid. I will not move. If you need to call ground operations, do it. But do not ask me to pay for your assumptions." Silence followed. It was a thick silence, heavy as a cooled iron. The cabin seemed to gather itself. Even the overhead bins felt like they were listening. Evan Brooks stepped forward, nervous but steady. "Sir, we can call ground ops. They are quick. It is the right path for a double booking." Clara shot him a warning look, but Captain Kane gave a curt nod. "Make the call." Clara pressed her radio, requesting ground operations at the aircraft door. "We have a duplicate assignment for Seat 3 Alpha." Whitaker rolled his eyes. He checked his watch with exaggerated drama. "I have a meeting tonight in Santa Monica, an important one, and I am not missing it because of her." Leah angled her phone to include him. "Important for whom?" she asked, voice low but firm. "Because what I'm seeing looks important for a lot of people." Whitaker sneered. "Put the phone down." "No," Leah said. Evan moved near Danielle. "Would you like some water?" "Ms. Harris?" "Yes, thank you." "Evan." Her name on his lips made something inside her ease. A small thing, a human thing, a person who saw her simply as a person. He brought the water, hands steady now, and set it on her tray. She wrapped her fingers around the cool plastic and took a small sip. She could feel her pulse in her palm. Slow, even, unafraid. Her thoughts drifted for a moment to a memory. Her mother at the kitchen table in a small apartment with thin walls, a pot of tea between them, a math worksheet on the table. Her mother had said, "You have a voice that carries without yelling. Use it. People will try to take your chair. Keep sitting." Danielle held the memory like a coin in her pocket, a private strength. The cabin door opened with a sigh. A woman in a navy blazer stepped in, badge gleaming, Priya Desai, ground operations. She moved with purpose, eyes scanning faces, posture sure. She was the sort of person who made space simply by standing in it. "What do we have?" she asked. Clara held out the tablet. "Double booking for 3A. We tried to move Ms. Harris to 6C to keep things on schedule." Priya read without speaking. Then she looked up. Her gaze was level, her tone was even. "Ms. Harris, may I see your boarding pass? Please." Danielle handed it to her. Priya studied it, then pressed a few commands on the tablet. She nodded once. "And, Mr. Whitaker, your boarding pass." Whitaker slapped the pass into her hand with theatrical impatience. Priya did not react. She read, she compared, she checked the timestamps on each reservation, she read the frequent flyer status lines, she scrolled to the internal note that showed payment verification and upgrade history. Her jaw set. "Ms. Harris, you are Platinum Pinnacle. Your reservation confirms 3A with upgrade guarantee met. Mr. Whitaker, your reservation was assigned 3A by error during a system refresh at check-in. The seat belongs to Ms. Harris." Whitaker sputtered, "I booked first." Priya did not flinch. Status rules and upgrade guarantees are not first come first served. They are contractual. This seat is hers. We will reassign you to another business seat or deplane you to a later flight. Your choice." The words dropped like stones into a still pond. Ripples went out through the rows. A low hum of voices rose from the cabin. Someone let out a quiet yes. Clara looked relieved for a heartbeat. Then she schooled her face back into neutral. Captain Kane seemed to grow smaller by a fraction, as if relief and regret were fighting inside him and neither wanted to be seen. Whitaker puffed up. "I'm not moving because some loyalty game says so. Move her. She can sit anywhere. I have a meeting." Priya's eyes cooled. "Sir, you will lower your voice. This is a commercial aircraft. You're causing a disturbance and you are speaking to a passenger with disrespect. You will take the reassigned seat or you will leave the flight." He stepped closer to her. Or what? Evan shifted his weight, ready to step between them if needed. Leah angled the camera to capture Whitaker's posture. Priya's calm. Danielle's steady gaze. Her chat exploded. Comments pleaded for consequences. Others asked for the airline name. More said they had seen this play out too many times. Danielle felt a wave of heat rise and pass. She was not angry in a wild way. She was not shaking. She was aware of her breath. She was aware of the cool patch of air that slipped around the side of the overhead bin and fell onto her shoulder. She was aware of the smell of brewed coffee from the galley. She was aware of her own patience, how it could stretch without breaking. Captain Kane tried again. "Mr. Whitaker, take 6C and we will compensate you after departure. We can no longer delay." Whitaker jabbed a finger in Danielle's direction. "This is why people like me cannot get ahead anymore. Special privileges, special rules, all for show." The words echoed. They tasted like rust. Danielle looked up at him. Her voice was soft. "This is not a show. This is a seat I paid for and confirmed. And it is the moment you choose whether to be a man who respects that or a man who does not." For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not remorse, not yet, but the faint recognition that he was standing on a cliff edge and the ground behind him had begun to crumble. Priya tapped her radio, security to the aircraft door, possible removal. Clara's eyes darted to the forward galley. She swallowed. Evan stood a little closer to Danielle, not touching, but present. Leah whispered into her phone. "They are calling security." The cabin held its breath once more. Time felt slow and full. Danielle set her water back on the tray. She smoothed a tiny wrinkle from her skirt. She looked at Priya and met her eyes. "Thank you," Danielle said, "for following the rules as they are written, not as they are imagined." Priya gave a single nod. "You should not have been asked to move." Danielle felt the truth of that sentence settle in her chest. It warmed her ribs. It steadied her spine. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply held the moment, knowing it was not yet over. At the doorway, the silhouettes of two security officers appeared against the bright rectangle of the jet bridge. Their radios crackled softly. The cabin buzzed with nervous energy. People shifted in their seats. Some looked away. Others leaned in. Grant Whitaker straightened his tie as if armor could be made from silk. He looked at Danielle and tried one more time. "Last chance," he said. She shook her head once. No. The officers stepped inside, and the flight hung on the edge of whatever would happen next. The two security officers moved into the cabin with slow, deliberate steps. One was tall, lean, his expression unreadable. The other was stockier, with a calm but watchful gaze. Their presence shifted the air, turning the low hum of whispers into something sharper, like the faint hum before a thunderstorm. Priya Desai addressed them without raising her voice. "This is Mr. Whitaker. He has been informed of the seating assignment and is refusing to comply with our instructions. He has also been verbally aggressive toward Miss Harris, the rightful ticket holder for Seat 3A. Whitaker threw up his hands. "Aggressive? I'm just asking for what I paid for." One of the officers raised a hand to pause him. "Sir, please step into the galley so we can discuss this." Whitaker looked past the officer, straight at Captain Russell Kane, as if expecting rescue. "Captain, tell them. I was here first." Kane shifted his weight. His jaw flexed, and he avoided Danielle's eyes. The truth was, he wanted this to end without making a judgment that might follow him beyond this flight. But he could feel the cameras on him, the eyes, the judgment forming in real time. "Ms. Harris," he said, his voice tightening. "If you were to move to another seat," Danielle cut in before he could finish. "Captain, I'm in my assigned seat. Your own ground operations manager has confirmed that. There's nothing left to move from except the discomfort of those unwilling to see me here." Her tone was calm but unyielding. Kane felt the words in his gut, though he didn't acknowledge it. The taller officer stepped closer to Whitaker. "Sir, I'm going to ask you again to join us in the galley." Whitaker's face flushed. "This is insane. I'm not leaving my seat." "It isn't your seat," Leah Simmons said from behind her phone. Her voice was steady, cutting through the growing tension. "You've been told, you've been shown, and still you're here acting like the rules don't apply to you." Her livestream chat was surging. Comments scrolled faster than she could read. People were already sharing the clip, tagging NorthStar Airlines, demanding accountability. Danielle turned her head slightly toward Leah. "Thank you." The stockier officer placed a gentle but firm hand on Whitaker's arm. "Sir, step this way." Whitaker jerked his arm back. "I have rights." Priya's voice sharpened just enough to slice through the moment. "And so does Ms. Harris. This airline honors the seat assignment of its highest status passengers. That's the contract you agreed to when you purchased your ticket." Danielle sat still, hands resting on the armrests, posture unshaken. But inside, her mind moved quickly, weighing the moment. She knew this was bigger than a seat. She knew every second was being broadcast beyond these walls, beyond this flight. She thought of the young analysts she had mentored, the interns who had confessed to her in hushed voices about being sidelined, underestimated, overlooked. She thought of the meetings where her contributions had been treated as optional until repeated by someone else. She thought of how this was not just for her, but for them, for anyone who had ever been told to move when they had the right to stay. Clara appeared at Kane's shoulder. "We're 20 minutes past departure. Captain." Kane exhaled heavily, rubbing his temple. "Remove him," he said. The officers moved in sync. Whitaker began protesting louder, his voice bouncing off the cabin walls. "This is discrimination. This is harassment." The irony was not lost on anyone. A couple of passengers shook their heads. Others avoided looking at him. As the officers guided him toward the front of the plane, Whitaker twisted around to face Danielle one last time. "You're going to regret this." Danielle met his gaze with an even expression. "No, you are." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cabin. Leah caught every frame. When the cabin door finally closed again, a noticeable shift occurred. The tension loosened, but it didn't disappear. Captain Kane stood there for a moment, looking at Danielle. His voice was quieter now. "Ms. Harris, we didn't realize that's the problem," she said. "You didn't need to realize who I was to do the right thing." Her words hung in the air like a verdict. Kane nodded faintly, then retreated toward the cockpit, the weight of the encounter settling into his posture. Priya lingered beside Danielle. "I'll make sure this incident is logged in full detail. And I'm sorry. You should never have been asked to move." Danielle inclined her head. "Thank you for handling it according to the rules." Clara approached next, her expression stiff. "We'll be serving drinks shortly." Danielle looked at her, saying nothing for a long moment. Then, in a tone both soft and firm, she said, "I hope the training they give you after this helps you see moments like these before they reach this point." Clara flushed slightly and moved away. Evan came by with a glass of sparkling water. "Here you go, Ms. Harris." "Thank you, Evan." When the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi, Danielle let herself breathe fully for the first time since boarding. She could feel her shoulders drop slightly, but her mind remained alert. She knew the incident was far from over. Once the wheels left the ground, the conversation would continue on phones, in offices, in boardrooms, across the aisle. Leah lowered her phone, finally ending the live stream. She leaned over slightly. "That was incredible. You didn't raise your voice once, and you still held the entire room." Danielle smiled faintly. "Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is refuse to move." Leah's eyes lit with understanding. "This video is already spreading. People are furious." Danielle looked out the window as the runway lights blurred into streaks. "Good. Fury is the first step. Change comes after." The nose of the plane lifted, and the city fell away beneath them. Danielle kept her gaze on the horizon, the hum of the engines steady in her ears. She knew this was not just the story of a seat dispute. It was the story of how rules were applied or ignored depending on who was sitting in the seat, and she intended to make sure that everyone who saw it understood that. As they climbed through the clouds, she reached for her folio and slid it onto her lap. She wasn't ready to open it yet, but having it there was a reminder she carried more than her identity in that case. She carried proof. She thought of when and how. She would reveal it. Not yet. Timing mattered. And when the time came, it would not just be about putting one man in his place. It would be about showing an entire system what happened when they mistook composure for compliance. The seatbelt sign stayed lit as the plane leveled. Danielle rested her head against the seat back, letting her eyes close for a brief moment. But she was not resting. She was waiting. She could feel the next move coming, and she was ready. The fasten seat belt sign blinked off with a soft chime, and the quiet hum of conversation began to return to the cabin. Flight attendants moved down the aisle, serving drinks and warm towels, but the atmosphere still carried an edge. It was as if the earlier conflict had left a faint vibration in the air, something unspoken that couldn't be smoothed over with service routines. Danielle sat in 3A, posture still, hands resting on her lap. Her mind was not on the beverage cart or the view of clouds drifting beneath them. She could feel eyes flicking toward her from across the cabin. She had seen that look before, curiosity mixed with hesitation, as though passengers weren't sure if they should acknowledge her or pretend nothing had happened. Leah Simmons, seated diagonally across, had put her phone down for now, but Danielle caught the quick glances she made toward her. The young journalist looked like she was holding back questions. Danielle gave her a small nod, a silent signal that she could speak. Leah leaned forward slightly. "That stream I ran earlier, it's everywhere already. The comments are furious. People are tagging the airline non-stop." Danielle sipped her water and set the cup back down. "Good. The truth needs eyes to see it." Before Leah could respond, a voice carried from a few rows back, "Well, some of us think she made too much of it." It was a man in his 60s, salt and pepper hair, speaking loudly enough for others to hear. He wore a casual blazer and an expression that seemed to challenge Danielle to respond. "What do you mean by that?" Leah asked, her voice sharp. The man shrugged. "All this fuss over a seat, holding up the flight. Some people just like to make themselves the center of attention." Danielle turned slowly to look at him. "And some people," she said evenly, "don't understand the difference between standing up for yourself and making a scene. They're not the same." A few passengers murmured in agreement. Others stayed silent, eyes down. The man muttered something and leaned back, but his words had cracked the silence, giving space for others to speak. Another voice, this time from a woman in a tailored navy dress across the aisle. "She's right. I saw it. She was here first, and they still tried to move her. That's not about a seat. That's about how you treat someone." Danielle met the woman's gaze briefly, a silent thank you passing between them. Clara Monroe appeared at the front of the cabin, her professional smile firmly in place. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be serving lunch shortly. Options are grilled chicken with seasonal vegetables or a vegetarian pasta." Her voice was smooth, but Danielle saw the way Clara's eyes flickered toward her and away again. The interaction was brief, almost invisible, but it carried a weight. Danielle wondered if Clara was replaying the scene in her head, seeing where she might have chosen differently. Grant Whitaker's name was no longer on the passenger manifest for this flight, but his presence lingered like an echo. Danielle knew he was likely still fuming somewhere in the terminal, already telling his version of events to anyone who would listen. She also knew that version would not match the footage Leah had captured. Leah leaned in again, speaking low. "People want to know who you are. They're already calling you the calmest woman they've ever seen in a fight like that." Danielle's lips curved slightly, though not quite into a smile. "My name doesn't matter yet. The point isn't who I am, it's what happened. If they focus on me, they'll forget the bigger picture." "And what's the bigger picture?" Leah asked. "That someone with less status on their ticket, less money in their account, less influence in their world, would have been removed without question, and no one would have recorded it. Leah nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that truth. A clatter from the galley drew eyes for a moment, then faded. Danielle let her mind drift to an earlier time years ago, boarding a red-eye flight in economy after a long meeting in another city. She remembered a man refusing to let her have the aisle seat she'd been assigned, claiming he needed it more. She had moved then, too tired to fight, but afterward she had realized how many times she had given up her space just to avoid making others uncomfortable. Not this time. The cabin lights dimmed slightly for meal service. Evan Brooks came by with a warm towel. "Ms. Harris, would you care for the chicken or the vegetarian pasta?" "The chicken, thank you." As he set her tray down, his voice dropped just enough for her to hear. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how things started earlier. Not everyone sees what's happening until it's almost too late." Danielle met his eyes. Seeing it is the first step. Choosing to act is the second. Evan nodded once, then moved on, his expression thoughtful. Halfway through the meal, Captain Kane's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize again for the delay at departure. We appreciate your patience. We are currently cruising at 35,000 feet and expect to arrive in Los Angeles on schedule." Danielle listened to the announcement, noting the absence of any acknowledgement of the incident. She wondered if Kane was already drafting a report in his head, choosing words that would minimize his role. She suspected he was. Leah returned to her phone, typing rapidly. Danielle caught the glow of the screen and the flood of notifications. The world outside this cabin was moving fast. She took another sip of water, feeling the coolness on her tongue, and considered the next steps. The truth was, she'd been holding something back. Her folio, still on her lap, contained documents that could change the tone of every conversation in this cabin, but she wasn't ready to open it yet. Timing was everything. Across the aisle, the man who had criticized her earlier was speaking again, this time to his seatmate. "I just think people should be reasonable. Planes run on schedules." Danielle didn't turn toward him. Instead, she spoke clearly enough for the nearest rouse to hear. Reasonable is following the rules as they're written, not as they're bent for convenience. Reasonable is treating every passenger the same, no matter who complains the loudest. The man fell silent. Leah's eyes met Danielle's, a faint smile there now. "You're not just holding your seat. You're holding the whole plane's attention." Danielle looked out the window at the endless white of the clouds. "Then let's hope they remember more than just the view." She cut a small piece of chicken, chewing slowly, giving herself a moment to breathe. In the corner of her mind, the decision was already forming. She knew the reveal was coming, and when it did, it wouldn't just close the argument, it would turn the whole story upside down. She rested her fork, picked up her water again, and let the hum of the engines fill the silence. For now, patience. For now, she would wait. The hum of the engines had settled into a steady background rhythm, a kind of airborne heartbeat that made conversation feel more intimate. The cabin was quieter now, but the quiet was deceptive. Danielle could sense the tension still coiled beneath the surface, like a thread pulled tight. She had just finished her meal when a familiar figure appeared at the front of the cabin. Priya Desai stepped in from the forward galley, her navy blazer perfectly pressed, her expression measured. It was unusual to see ground operations personnel on board mid-flight, but Priya carried herself as if she belonged here. Several passengers looked up, curious. Leah reached for her phone, ready to record if needed. Priya approached Danielle's seat with calm purpose. "Ms. Harris, may I have a word?" Danielle set her napkin down, meeting Priya's gaze. "Of course." Priya gestured toward the small service alcove at the front of the cabin, just out of earshot of the nearest passengers. Danielle rose, smoothing her jacket, and followed her. The narrow space smelled faintly of coffee and the citrusy hand soap from the lavatory. "I wanted to let you know," Priya began, "that the incident earlier is already being escalated to corporate. The livestream has gone viral. Our public relations team has been notified, and the CEO has been briefed." Danielle listened without interrupting, her face calm. Priya's voice lowered. "There is more. Mr. Whitaker attempted to rebook onto the next flight to Los Angeles, but security flagged him after reviewing the footage. He will not be flying with us again." Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. "That was fast. The video leaves little room for interpretation," Priya said. "The language he used. His refusal to comply at all violates passenger conduct policy. But that's only part of the reason I came to speak to you. Go on." Priya glanced toward the curtain separating them from the rest of the cabin. "There are some in leadership who are already framing this as an isolated misunderstanding. They'll say it was an unfortunate mix-up, nothing more. I've seen it before. It's how they avoid making changes." Danielle felt a small spark of recognition. She had heard those same words in corporate boardrooms, in HR debriefings, in polished press statements that said everything and nothing at once. "That's not surprising," Danielle said. "Systems protect themselves first." Priya's eyes met hers, steady. "I think you should know. The CEO is on standby to speak with you as soon as we land. But if you have anything you want to present to him, anything that shows this is not just about one seat assignment, now would be the time to prepare it." Danielle glanced at the leather folio she still carried. She had been waiting for the right moment to use what was inside documents that tied her not just to this flight, but to the airline itself. Timing mattered. She wanted the reveal to be undeniable, impossible to reframe or downplay. "Thank you, Priya," she said. "You've been direct with me, and I appreciate that." Priya nodded once. "I'll make sure the captain knows that any further interaction with you needs to be handled with the utmost respect." As Danielle returned to her seat, she noticed the way passengers' eyes followed her. Leah was watching closely, phone in hand. The man who had criticized her earlier now avoided looking at her altogether. She settled back into 3A, folding her hands over the folio. Leah leaned forward. What was that about? Danielle kept her tone even. An update, corporate knows, and they're waiting for me. Leah's eyebrows lifted. "Are you going to tell them who you are?" "Not yet," Danielle said. "Why not?" "Because right now, this is just a story about one woman keeping her seat. If I reveal too soon, it becomes a story about a CEO throwing her weight around. I need it to stay what it is for as long as possible." Leah considered that, then nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Evan appeared with coffee. "Would you like some, Ms. Harris?" "Yes, please." As he poured, his voice dropped. I heard Priya talking to the captain. She told him, quote, "Don't underestimate her. I think she likes you." Danielle allowed the smallest smile. "I like people who do their jobs without bias. That's all." Evan grinned faintly and moved on to the next row. The cabin was calmer now, but it wasn't long before a ripple of conversation spread from the back. A passenger in row 8 was speaking loudly, complaining about delays and referencing the woman in 3A as the cause. The words carried just enough to reach Danielle's ears. She didn't turn around. She had learned long ago that not every provocation needed a response. Some crumbled on their own when left untouched. Leah, however, wasn't so restrained. She twisted in her seat. Hey, maybe blame the system that double-booked the seat instead of the person who was rightfully sitting in it. The passenger muttered something under his breath but quieted. Danielle sipped her coffee, feeling its warmth. She thought of the conversation waiting for her in Los Angeles. She pictured the CEO's face when he realized exactly who he'd be meeting. The thought didn't bring her satisfaction so much as a sense of inevitability. Priya passed through the cabin once more, speaking briefly with Clara. Danielle noticed Clara's shoulders stiffen before she forced a smile and returned to serving drinks. It was a small thing, but Danielle recognized it the moment when someone realized their actions had been seen, documented, and would have to be answered for. She glanced out the window at the endless expanse of sky. The clouds stretched in every direction, unbroken. The moment felt suspended, as though the plane itself was caught between two worlds, the one before the confrontation and the one after. She rested her hand on the folio. It wasn't heavy, but it carried weight all the same. When she opened it, the conversation would change. The question was when to do it mid-flight, where witnesses could hear every word, or on the ground, where the cameras could capture the reaction. She decided she would know when the moment came. For now, she would let the tension build. She placed the folio back on her lap, leaned slightly toward Leah, and said, "When the time comes, keep that camera steady." Leah's eyes widened, but she nodded. Got it. The rest of the flight moved with quiet efficiency, but Danielle could feel the undercurrent. Every time someone passed her seat, she caught a flicker of awareness in their eyes. She knew the story wasn't over. It was just waiting for the next spark. She could be patient. The cabin lights dimmed as the sun began to set beyond the horizon. Through the oval windows, streaks of gold and rose bled into the deepening blue, the kind of view that usually softened even the most restless traveler. But in 3A, Danielle Harris sat upright, her gaze fixed ahead, as if the beauty outside couldn't yet touch her. The folio still rested on her lap, the smooth leather cool beneath her fingertips. She had carried it through countless meetings, contract signings, and negotiations that had decided the fate of entire companies. Now, on this flight, it held something far simpler but far more personal proof of who she was, and why this entire incident was about more than one man's entitlement. Leah Simmons shifted in her seat, sensing the shift in Danielle's focus. "Is it time?" she asked softly. "Almost," Danielle replied. A few rows back, murmurs were still passing between passengers. Words like disruption, delay, and overreaction drifted through the air like faint smoke. Danielle heard them, but she let them fade. She was waiting for the moment when silence would serve her better than any argument, the moment when eyes and ears would be fully open. That moment came unexpectedly. Clara Monroe, her smile polished but her movements tighter than usual, stopped beside Danielle's row. "Ms. Harris," she said, "the captain would like to extend an invitation for you to join him in the cockpit once we land." As a gesture of goodwill, Danielle tilted her head slightly. "That's generous, but I think the more important conversation should happen here, where everyone can hear it." Clara blinked. "Here. Yes," Danielle said, her voice steady. "Right here." She set the folio on the tray table and opened it slowly, the soft click of the clasp breaking the hum of the engines. The leather parted to reveal a neatly stacked set of documents, each enclosed in protective sleeves. On top was a letter printed on crisp paper bearing the gold and navy seal of NorthStar Holdings. Leah angled her phone. Her livestream rekindled. The red light glowed as the lens caught every movement. Danielle lifted the letter and began to read aloud, her voice carrying without effort. To confirm, Ms. Danielle Harris serves as chairwoman of the board for NorthStar Holdings, the majority shareholder of NorthStar Airlines. She holds a 51% controlling interest in the corporation. Gasps broke the air, heads turned, necks craned. Even the man who had criticized her earlier now stared openly, his mouth half open. Danielle lowered the paper. "So when I tell you that I am in my rightful seat, it is not only because my boarding pass says so, it is because this airline operates in part under my authority, and today that authority was ignored, not because of a system error alone, but because of an assumption about who belongs in this seat and who does not." Evan Brooks had paused mid-step in the aisle, a tray of drinks in his hands. His eyes were wide, but his grip was steady. Clara, standing beside Danielle, shifted her weight as if suddenly aware of the ground beneath her feet. Captain Kane emerged from the cockpit, his face unreadable but his presence heavier than before. "Ms. Harris, if I may, you may listen," Danielle interrupted. The cabin was utterly still now. The hum of the engines was the only sound besides her voice. "This is not about humiliating one man," she said, "though Mr. Whitaker certainly earned the consequences of his actions. This is about every passenger who has been told to move, to step aside, to take less, because someone louder or more familiar demanded more." Leah's phone caught every word, her viewers flooding the feed with comments. "This is unreal. She owns the airline. Accountability now." Danielle placed the letter back in the folio and looked directly at Kane. "If I, as the owner of this airline, can be treated as though I have no place here, then what happens to those without my resources? Without my title?" Kane's throat worked, but no words came. Clara opened her mouth, then closed it again, her usual composure faltering. Evan stepped forward. "Ms. Harris, I just want to say, I'm sorry, thank you," Danielle said, and she meant it. Acknowledgement mattered. She turned back to the cabin. "I will be speaking with the board to ensure new training, new policies, and new leadership where necessary. What happened today will not be buried as a misunderstanding." A ripple of low applause began from the back, hesitant at first, then spreading. Not everyone joined, but enough did to change the air in the room. Danielle closed the folio and rested her hands on it. "Let's be clear. This seat is not a privilege granted at someone else's whim. It is a right earned and paid for, just like anyone else's." Priya Desai appeared in the aisle, having moved quietly from her jump seat to stand near Danielle. She gave a subtle nod, her expression one of approval. Leah ended her live stream, already certain the clip would be replayed thousands of times before they even touched down in Los Angeles. Danielle leaned back, not with the satisfaction of victory, but with the composure of someone who had simply restored balance. Outside the window, the last light of day faded into a deep, endless night. The journey was far from over, but the course was set, and for the first time since she boarded, she felt the cabin truly belonged to everyone in it. The echo of applause lingered for a moment before fading into a charged silence. Danielle stayed seated in 3A, her hands resting lightly on the closed folio. Her calm was unshaken, but her eyes held the steady focus of someone who knew exactly what needed to happen next. Priya remained at her side, as if ready to confirm or enforce whatever came next. Leah's phone was back in her hand, not live streaming this time, but recording nonetheless. The red light glowed, capturing every expression, every word. Danielle's voice was clear and measured. "Captain Kane, step forward." Kane obeyed, his polished shoes whispering against the carpet. He stopped just beside Clara, who was still holding her service clipboard like a lifeline. "You are in command of this aircraft," Danielle said, "but command is not only about flight paths and safety protocols. It is about judgment. Today your judgment failed. You sided with volume instead of verification. You acted on assumption before evidence." Kane's mouth tightened. "I was trying to avoiding conflict is not the same as resolving it," Danielle interrupted, "especially when avoiding means asking the wrong person to make the sacrifice." Clara's knuckles whitened around her clipboard. Danielle turned her gaze on her. "And you? A senior flight attendant sets the tone for the entire cabin crew. The way you handled me at boarding is the way your team will handle others. What you demonstrated today was not policy. It was preference." Clara swallowed, her usual steady demeanor replaced by a flicker of shame. "This is not about embarrassing you," Danielle continued. "It's about ensuring you never make that mistake again." Danielle looked back to Priya. "Here's what will happen. When we land, I want a written incident report from every crew member who witnessed what happened. That report will go directly to the board. I will expect it within 24 hours. Priya gave a sharp nod. "Consider it done." Danielle's gaze returned to Kane. "You will be the first to attend a new round of training on unconscious bias and passenger rights. Every senior officer under you will follow." Kane nodded, his pride clearly stung but his tone respectful. "Understood." Clara shifted, her lips parting to speak, but Danielle continued. "You will complete the same training, Clara, and you will lead the first refresher session for your own team." Clara's voice was quiet. "Yes, Ms. Harris." Leah's camera caught every detail: Kane's stiff posture, Clara's lowered eyes, Priya's steady composure. Danielle's tone softened slightly. "I don't believe every mistake is malicious, but I do believe every mistake has a cost. And the cost today was not just my time, but the trust of everyone in this cabin who watched the rules bend for the loudest voice." From further down the aisle, a passenger spoke up. "She's right. I've seen things like this happen before. Never thought I'd see someone actually push back and win." Danielle inclined her head toward the speaker. "It's not about winning. It's about setting the record straight so it doesn't have to be done again." Priya stepped in. "Ms. Harris, do you want to address the passengers as a whole?" Danielle considered this for a moment, then rose from her seat. She faced the cabin, her presence commanding without force. "I want you all to think about what you saw today," she began. "If you took away the titles, the money, the influence, if I were just another passenger without a camera on me, would the outcome have been the same?" A few people shook their heads. Others stayed silent, but their eyes told the truth. "That's the problem," Danielle said, "and it's why this incident won't disappear when we land." Leah's phone caught the ripple of reaction moving through the rows. From this point forward, Danielle continued, this airline will operate under a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. No passenger will be displaced without documented cause that stands up to company and federal policy. Every crew member will be retrained on this within the month, Priya added, and I will personally oversee the first sessions. Danielle nodded. Thank you. Priya. She returned to her seat, feeling the subtle shift in the air. The tension had not vanished, but it had changed shape. What had begun as confrontation was now something else, accountability taking root in real time. Evan approached quietly, leaning down to speak. I've worked in this job for 4 years, Ms. Harris, and I've never seen anyone talk to the captain like that. Danielle looked at him. Maybe it's time someone did. He smiled faintly, then moved back toward the galley. For the rest of the flight, conversation hummed in low tones. Some passengers avoided eye contact. Others offered small nods of respect when Danielle glanced their way. Leah kept her phone on the armrest, the recording light still burning, ready for anything more. Near the end of the cabin, the man who had criticized her earlier now sat quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the seat back ahead of him. Outside, the last light of day had faded completely. The cabin was awash in the soft glow of reading lamps and the faint blue of night. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, not to rest, but to let her thoughts settle. She had done what she came to do, but she knew the ripples would continue long after the plane touched down. In her mind, she saw the faces of people she'd never met, passengers on future flights, who might be spared the same treatment because of what happened here. That was the point. Not the seat, not the title, the change. She opened her eyes again, steady and calm. The engines hummed, the flight continued, and somewhere in the heart of this plane, a shift had already begun. The landing gear lowered with a muffled thud, and the cabin trembled as the aircraft descended toward Los Angeles. The city lights glittered below like scattered embers in the night, stretching endlessly in every direction. Inside the plane, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. The earlier confrontation had left its imprint, and though everyone tried to act as if the flight had returned to normal, the truth was that the story had only paused, waiting for the next scene to unfold. Priya Desai stood at the front of the cabin, speaking into her radio. Her voice was calm but clipped. Security will meet us at the gate. Mr. Whitaker will be escorted off before any other passenger deplanes. Danielle heard her words, though she didn't react outwardly. She sat still, the leather folio on her lap, watching the lights grow closer. She thought about the man pacing some corner of the terminal earlier, stewing in his own entitlement. She knew this would not be a quiet removal. Men like him rarely allowed their departure to be graceful. The seatbelt sign pinged on. Captain Kane's voice came over the intercom, all clipped professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be on the ground shortly. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. The wheels touched down with a firm jolt, the engines roaring in reverse thrust. A ripple of relief moved through the cabin, but underneath it, a sharper current of expectation. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Danielle glanced across the aisle at Leah Simmons. The young journalist's phone was ready, camera aimed discreetly toward the front of the cabin. Leah's eyes met hers. "Ready," she mouthed. Danielle gave a small nod. The aircraft came to a stop. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the shuffle of movement began passengers reaching for bags, unbuckling belts, stretching cramped legs. But before anyone could stand, Priya's voice rang out clearly. "Remain seated, please." 2 uniformed security officers stepped into the cabin. Their presence was quiet but commanding. Behind them, Grant Whitaker appeared in the doorway, his expression tight and defiant. He had been allowed to reboard under supervision to collect his belongings. But it was clear he had no intention of leaving without one last display. "This is absurd," he announced to the cabin, projecting his voice as though auditioning for sympathy. "I paid for this flight, and I'm being treated like a criminal." From behind her camera, Leah caught the mutters and eye rolls of passengers who had witnessed everything. Priya stepped forward. "Mr. Whitaker, you were removed from this flight due to your conduct toward another passenger and crew. That decision stands. You are also hereby prohibited from future travel with NorthStar Airlines." Whitaker laughed, the sound brittle. "Oh, so now we're banning people for standing up for themselves." Danielle spoke for the first time since landing. Standing up for yourself is not the same as standing on someone else's rights. The cabin went still again. Whitaker turned toward her, his face flushed. "You think you've won something here." Danielle's voice was calm, her tone unshakable. "I've won nothing. What happened here is not a victory. It is a correction, and it's one this company will remember." The security officers flanked him. "Sir, it's time to go." Whitaker's eyes swept the cabin, looking for allies, but found none. He adjusted his jacket, squared his shoulders, and walked the length of the aisle under the weight of dozens of stares. The click of Leah's phone recording seemed to follow him. When he reached the door, Priya handed him a folded paper. "This is your official notice of travel ban. It includes contact information should you wish to file an appeal, though I would advise you to review the airline's conduct policy before doing so." Whitaker snatched the paper and stepped into the jet bridge without another word. The officers followed, the cabin door closing firmly behind them. Silence lingered for a beat. Then Priya turned to Danielle. "Would you like to address the passengers before we deplane?" Danielle considered for a moment, then stood, resting one hand lightly on the headrest in front of her. "Thank you for your patience tonight," she began. "What happened here was uncomfortable for everyone. I know, but I also know that the discomfort of watching injustice is nothing compared to the cost of experiencing it." She paused, letting the words settle. "Some of you may think this was just about a seat. It wasn't. It was about the principle that no one should be displaced, dismissed, or disregarded because of assumptions about who they are. That principle matters on planes, in offices, in classrooms, everywhere." Her gaze moved slowly across the cabin, meeting eyes one by one. "I have resources. I have influence. And still, I was asked to move. Imagine how often it happens to those who don't have the ability to fight back." A man in the third row lowered his eyes. A woman in row 5 nodded slowly. "I will be working with the board to ensure that what happened here does not happen again," Danielle said. "And I encourage each of you, if you see someone being treated unfairly, speak up. The right thing is often the harder thing in the moment, but it's worth it." She sat back down, the quiet in the cabin deeper now, less tense and more thoughtful. Priya gave her a small nod of acknowledgement before moving toward the door. As the passengers began to stand and collect their belongings, several paused to speak to Danielle. A young man in a hoodie murmured, "Thank you for not backing down," a middle-aged woman said softly. "My daughter needs to see that video." Leah tucked her phone into her bag. "That clip of him being escorted out. It's already uploading. People are going to know exactly how this went down." Danielle picked up her folio and stood, smoothing her jacket. Then let's hope they also know why. The line began to move. Passengers filing toward the exit. Some glanced back at her. Others gave small nods or smiles. Danielle returned each one, steady and composed. When she reached the door, Captain Kane was standing there. His posture was straighter than before, but there was a trace of humility in his expression. "Ms. Harris," he said quietly, "I apologize." Danielle met his eyes. "I hope you mean that enough to make changes." "I do," he said, and she believed he meant it, at least in this moment. She stepped into the jet bridge, the cool air washing over her. Outside, the terminal was bright and bustling, unaware of the quiet reckoning that had just taken place on Flight 815. And as Danielle walked toward the terminal's main concourse, she knew this was not the end of the story. The real work, the lasting work, would begin now. The terminal lights felt almost too bright after the dim, controlled atmosphere of the cabin. Danielle stepped into the concourse, her folio in hand, moving at an unhurried pace despite the low thrum of attention building around her. She could feel eyes on her passengers from the flight, travelers who had caught pieces of the live stream, and a few with phones already raised. Leah was just a step behind, weaving easily through the crowd. "That video is everywhere now," she said under her breath. "Comments are in the thousands. News outlets are already clipping it. Danielle didn't break stride. Then they'll hear it from me directly before they start making up their own version." Priya caught up to her near the baggage claim area. "Ms. Harris, there's a quiet conference room upstairs we can use. The CEO is on a secure line waiting for you." Danielle gave a small nod. "Lead the way." They took a side elevator to the second floor, moving past glass walls that looked out over the bustling terminal. Inside the conference room, the air was cooler, quieter. A large screen lit up with the airline's logo before switching to the image of a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a deliberate, practiced posture. "Danielle," he began, his tone clipped, "I've been briefed on what happened." "Then, you know this isn't just a public relations problem," she replied, setting her folio on the table. "It's a systemic one." He exhaled through his nose, clearly aware that she wasn't here to be placated. "We're prepared to issue an apology and remove Whitaker from our customer database." "That's a start," Danielle said, "but not enough. Your staff acted on bias before fact. They pressured a paying passenger me to give up my seat because a louder man demanded it. If that's how they treat a high-status passenger, I have no illusions about how they treat everyone else." Leah had started recording again, the camera steady in her hands. Danielle didn't stop her. "Training will be updated. The CEO said we'll issue memos." Danielle leaned forward slightly. "You'll issue more than memos. Every cabin crew and captain will undergo mandatory unconscious bias and passenger rights training within 30 days. You will implement a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, enforceable by immediate suspension pending review, and you will make these changes public." The CEO hesitated. "That kind of commitment will draw scrutiny." "Good," Danielle said. "Scrutiny is how you know people are paying attention." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You'll have it. "And one more thing," Danielle said. "Your communications team will stop calling incidents like this misunderstandings. That word hides the truth." "Agreed," he said. She sat back, her expression calm but resolute. "Then we're done here." The call ended, the screen going dark. Priya looked relieved. "I'll coordinate with training to make sure the timeline holds." Danielle stood. "Thank you, Priya. You handled yourself well tonight." As they stepped back into the terminal, the noise hit them like a wave. A small group of people had gathered near the exit, some holding phones, others simply watching. Danielle kept her stride steady, her gaze ahead. Outside, a cool breeze swept in from the open-air pickup area. The scent of jet fuel mingled with the faint sweetness of the night air. A black car waited at the curb, its driver holding the door open. Leah stopped before getting in. "I'm going to send the full video to a few outlets I trust. They'll run it with context." Danielle gave a single nod. "Make sure they understand it's not about me. It's about what you stood for," Leah said, "and people need to see that." The ride into the city was quiet at first, the hum of the tires on asphalt filling the space. Streetlights flickered across Danielle's face as she looked out the window. She thought about the faces in the cabin, the ones who had spoken up, the ones who had stayed silent, and the ones who had watched everything unfold without meeting her eyes. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a senior board member. Saw the clip. "You did the right thing. Let's talk tomorrow." She put the phone away without replying. There would be plenty of talking in the days ahead. Half an hour later, they reached her hotel, a tall glass tower overlooking the downtown skyline. Inside, the lobby was calm, the scent of fresh flowers drifting from a vase on the reception desk. She crossed the marble floor, her heels clicking softly, and took the elevator up to her suite. The city spread out below her in lights, endless and alive. Danielle set her folio on the desk, removed her jacket, and sat in the armchair by the window. For the first time since boarding the flight, she allowed herself to exhale fully, but the calm didn't last long. Her phone rang an unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Harris." The voice was young, nervous. I just wanted to say thank you. I was in row 10 on your flight. I've had things like that happen to me before. I never thought I'd see someone push back and win." Danielle's tone softened. "I didn't push back to win. I pushed back so it wouldn't happen to you again." The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think it already made a difference." When the call ended, Danielle sat for a long moment, staring out at the lights. The night was just beginning for the city, but for her, the day's wait was finally settling in. Still, there was no regret, the discomfort, the confrontation, the scrutiny. It had all been worth it. Tomorrow, the airline's changes would begin to take shape. Tomorrow, the headlines would carry her words into homes and offices. But tonight, in the quiet of her room, Danielle let herself believe that a shift had already begun, not just in policy, but in people. She closed her eyes briefly, holding on to that thought. When she opened them again, the city was still there, vast and glittering, a reminder that there was always more work to be done. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. News anchors leaned forward over desks with serious expressions, clips from Leah's live stream looping in the corner of the screen. The moment Danielle opened her folio and read her title aloud played again and again, her calm voice cutting through studio chatter. Social media was a storm, some posts cheering her composure, others furious at the injustice that had unfolded. The hashtags carried her name alongside the airlines. Danielle sat at the small dining table in her hotel suite, sipping black coffee and scrolling through her phone. Every major outlet had requested an interview. Board members had sent texts of support. Strangers had written messages that ranged from heartfelt gratitude to deeply personal accounts of their own experiences with discrimination while traveling. One caught her attention, a short video from a young woman sitting cross-legged on her bed, speaking directly to the camera. "I'm a flight attendant," she said, "and I've seen passengers asked to move for reasons that had nothing to do with safety or seating. What happened to Ms. Harris? It happens to people without her resources all the time. I'm glad she didn't move." Danielle put the phone down and stared out the window at the waking city. The early light painted the rooftops gold, but she could feel the weight of expectation in every message, every headline. This was no longer about one flight. It was about a system being held to account. Her phone rang, Priya's name on the screen. "We've begun internal reviews," Priya said without preamble. "Crew members from your flight have already submitted their reports. Some are candid." "Candid is good," Danielle said. "Truth doesn't change when you write it down." Priya hesitated. "There's also pushback. Some are framing this as overreaction." Danielle allowed herself a quiet breath. That's the sound of a system trying to protect itself. "We're scheduling the first round of bias training next week," Priya continued. "The CEO wants you to address the leadership team before it starts." "Tell him I'll be there," Danielle said. After the call, she dressed in a simple dark dress and blazer, hair pulled back, her presence as precise as her words. Down in the hotel lobby, she met Leah, who had her camera bag slung over one shoulder. "The clip's been viewed 3 million times," Leah said as they walked toward the waiting car. "And that's just the original post." Danielle gave a small nod. "Numbers matter, but what matters more is what people do after watching." They arrived at a television studio where Danielle would give her first on-air interview since the incident. In the green room, a producer with a headset outlined the questions. But Danielle already knew what she would say. On air, the host asked her to recount the confrontation. She did so without embellishment, her tone steady. But when the host asked how it felt to be treated that way despite her position, she leaned in slightly. "It's not about my position. It's about the fact that without it, I might have been walked off that plane. And that's what happens to too many people whose names will never trend online." The clip went viral within the hour. By mid-afternoon, Danielle was back in the airline's headquarters, seated at the head of a long conference table. Senior executives filled the room, their faces composed but tense. Priya stood near the door, her presence quiet but firm. Danielle began without small talk. "What happened on Flight 815 is not isolated. You all know that. It's the result of unchecked assumptions and a culture that rewards avoiding conflict over confronting bias. That changes today." She laid out a plan: mandatory retraining for all crew, new reporting systems for passengers, leadership accountability for every incident, and quarterly audits of customer service practices. As she spoke, she saw the shift in the room, some leaning forward, some crossing their arms, some already calculating the cost. When she finished, she looked around the table. "You can view this as damage control, or you can view it as an opportunity to lead the industry. The choice is yours." After the meeting, Priya caught up to her in the hallway. "You know they'll resist some of it," she said quietly. "Of course they will," Danielle replied. Change isn't comfortable. That evening, Danielle returned to her hotel to find a small crowd gathered outside, some with cameras, others just hoping to see her. A man in his 20s approached shyly. "My mom was on your flight," he said. "She called me right after you landed. She said she's never seen someone handle a situation like that with so much grace. Tell her I'm glad she was there," Danielle said, and she meant it. Witnesses mattered, upstairs in her room. She finally allowed herself a moment to sit in the stillness. The hum of the city outside was faint through the glass. She thought about the next flight she would take, how she would walk down the jet bridge, take her seat, and wonder if the changes she had fought for had taken hold. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "I was on that flight, too. I stayed quiet. I shouldn't have. Thank you for speaking for those of us who froze." Danielle stared at the words for a long moment before typing her reply. "Next time, you won't freeze. That's the point." She set the phone down and looked out at the city. The ripple had started. Now it was up to everyone else to decide how far it would travel. 2 months later. The early morning light washed across the tarmac at Boston Logan International Airport. Danielle Harris walked through the familiar glass corridor of Gate C-21, the same gate where she had boarded Flight 815. Her pace was steady. Her presence quiet but impossible to ignore. This flight was different. The airline had changed, not just in policies or memos, but in atmosphere. She could feel it the moment she reached the boarding gate, the way the gate agent smiled warmly and greeted her by name without glancing twice at her boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Harris. We're glad to have you with us again." The words were simple, but they landed with weight. Danielle returned the smile and stepped into the jet bridge, breathing in the faint scent of jet fuel and new beginnings. Inside the cabin, the senior flight attendant stood at the front, greeting each passenger. She was no younger than Clara Monroe, with bright eyes and a calm confidence. "Good morning, Ms. Harris," she said. "Your seat is 3A. Can I offer you a drink before takeoff?" Danielle nodded. "Water will be fine. Thank you." She slid into her seat and set her leather folio in the overhead bin. Around her, passengers settled in with the usual mix of chatter, phone calls, and quiet preparation for the hours ahead. There was no tension in the air, no undercurrent of suspicion or challenge. Halfway through boarding, Danielle noticed a small moment unfold 2 rows back. A man in a business suit was trying to stow his bag in an overhead bin, but the space was full. A younger woman, already seated, stood and offered to rearrange her things so he could fit his bag. The exchange was polite, warm, without entitlement or demand. Danielle felt the corner of her mouth lift slightly. It wasn't about overhead bin space, not really. It was about the tone and instinct toward cooperation, not dominance. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Russell Kane, and I'll be flying you to Los Angeles today." Danielle recognized the name instantly. Kane's voice was steadier than the last time she'd heard it, warmer somehow. She wondered if he had recognized her name on the manifest. Before departure, Kane stepped out from the cockpit. He scanned the cabin until he found her. "Ms. Harris," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "It's good to have you on board again. I wanted to thank you for what you started. We've completed the first round of training, and it's changing things." Danielle nodded once, then "Keep going. Training is only the first step. We will," he promised, then returned to the cockpit. The plane taxied smoothly and lifted into the pale morning sky. Danielle looked out the window, the ground falling away beneath her, and thought about the past 2 months. The training sessions had been rolled out to every crew member. The reporting system had been streamlined, and incidents of passenger displacement had dropped significantly. The board had signed off on quarterly audits, and Priya Desai had been promoted to oversee compliance company-wide. Some changes had been met with resistance. Of course. There were still those who believed the incident had been overblown, but the numbers spoke for themselves, and so did the passengers who now wrote in to praise the professionalism of the crew. Midway through the flight, the younger flight attendant returned with a fresh glass of water. "Ms. Harris, I just wanted to tell you, I watched your video when I was still in training. It's part of our orientation now." Danielle looked up, surprised. "It is, yes. We're told. This is how you stay calm. This is how you stand your ground without raising your voice. I've never forgotten it." "Thank you," Danielle said quietly. The attendant's smile was genuine. "Enjoy your flight." As the hours passed, Danielle let herself relax into the rhythm of travel, the muted conversations, the faint clink of glasses, the soft murmur of the engines. She thought about Leah Simmons, who had continued to cover stories about bias and injustice in travel. She thought about Priya, whose sharp, steady leadership had turned a moment into a movement, and she thought, briefly, about Grant Whitaker. Now, just another name on a no-fly list, his outburst serving as a cautionary tale for others. Near the end of the flight, Captain Kane's voice came on again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Los Angeles. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone that here at NorthStar Airlines, every passenger's seat, safety, and dignity matter equally." It was a small thing, but Danielle knew those words hadn't been in his announcements before. The plane touched down with a smooth glide, and the cabin filled with the usual rustle of preparation disembark. As Danielle stood to retrieve her folio, a man in the aisle seat beside her said, "I know who you are." Danielle glanced at him. "And who is that?" "The woman who changed the way people think about who belongs in these seats." She gave him a polite nod, not out of pride, but acknowledgement. When she stepped into the terminal, the air smelled faintly of ocean salt drifting in from the Pacific. Her car was waiting, but she didn't rush. She stood for a moment, watching passengers from her flight greet loved ones, check their phones, or hurry toward connecting gates. She saw small kindnesses in motion, someone helping with a heavy bag, another holding a place in line. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better, and better mattered. As she walked toward the exit, Danielle thought about the journey that had started with a seat number and a refusal to move. It had grown into something larger than she had imagined, a reminder that the smallest act of resistance could echo farther than the person who made it. Sometimes, she thought, change begins not with a loud demand, but with a quiet no. She stepped into the sunlight, the sound of the city around her, and knew the work was not finished, but it was moving forward, one flight, one choice, one person at a time. The plane lands, but the story does not. A woman kept her seat, and a company found its mirror. Policies changed. Training began. Passengers felt seen, not because of outrage alone, but because quiet resolve met a louder lie and did not break. Let this linger with you. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a ride. Every time bias tries to push someone back, another person can choose to stand beside them. In a cabin or a classroom or an office, the rule is the same. Respect first, assumptions never. If this story moved you, carry it with care. Offer your seat when it is kindness. Defend your seat when it is justice. Condemn the small violences that hide behind convenience. Choose the harder right over the easier wrong. We will be back soon with more true moments of quiet courage and real accountability. Stay with us. Like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Until the next flight, take care of one another.